Hey everyone, Shaun Stevenson here, author of the Throne series, and today we are talking Nightmare Hall by Diane Hoh. Now, this is book number 1 in the Nightmare Hall series, The Silent Scream. And recently I found an entire, almost run of these books. I only have 6 left in the whole series to find, and I have the whole series. But since I had book number 1, I thought, okay, I want to read one of these. Let's see what it's like. This one was a little bit longer than a regular Fear Street book, but it was very interesting because it did remind me a lot of Fear Street, kind of in the way that there's some of the Fear Streets have a little bit of a supernatural element to them. This book was more like one of those than other books. So let's get into it. Now, Nightmare Hall has a ton of books in the series. There's almost about 30 of them. And the series all takes place at Salem University and in and around a place called Nightingale Hall, which has been renamed Nightmare Hall by the students on campus. And it starts off in this book where the students are moving into Nightmare Hall, Nightingale Hall, and there has been a terrible accident that took place at Nightmare Hall. In fact, Jess, one of the new freshmen at the school, she's coming in and she is going to stay in the very room where this accident took place. And the question is, was it an accident exactly? That's the real question. Now, I need to be careful how I talk about this because this book does contain some very sensitive storylines that if some people, if you have ever struggled with self-harm, this is a book probably to avoid. It definitely talks about that in some of the sections of this book, and I think it does a actually fairly good job talking about that very difficult subject. So I don't want to talk a ton about that because we will get into some spoilers, but I just did want to mention that in case you're thinking about reading this book and that is something that is a no-go for you. I always want to be careful when I'm recommending books to make sure that you know, like if, hey, there's going to be a storyline here that's a little bit intense, you should know ahead of time in my personal opinion so you can find something that you want to read or something you're thinking, oh, I actually probably should skip that. Now, Jess has just moved into Nightmare Hall, Nightingale Hall, into the room where this accident has taken place. And she does begin to wonder, wait a minute, was this an accident? Because everything she's finding seems to support that it was not an accident. And so Jess is trying to figure out like what is going on, what has happened in this room where she is staying. At the same time, she's trying to get to know all the other students that she is now rooming with in Nightingale Hall. There's also the handyman who works at Nightingale Hall. There's the caretaker, Mrs. Coates of Nightingale Hall, which I'm not going to talk a lot about her because spoilers. And there's a lot of interesting things that take place. Now, when I read this, I definitely read it over a few days. And I definitely was feeling so nostalgic about my own days in a dorm at college. And so if you have ever lived in a dorm at college, this will definitely take you back to that. I think Diane has really captured a lot of the feel of those kinds of conversations you have, the late night things that go on where you're all going to pack in a car and drive to some random hole in the wall restaurant and have dinner together for hours on end and barely tip and all those sorts of things. You should always tip, just FYI. But this book really captures, I feel like, that college experience. You don't have a ton that takes place in the classrooms, which I kind of appreciated, at least in this one, and so far in book 2, which I'm also reading right now. But it doesn't have a lot taking place in the classrooms. It's mostly, they talk about going into classes, or they're in the library, or they're in the cafeteria, places like that where conversations happen. This book is also scary. There were definitely some scary moments that I definitely felt a little bit disturbed by and thought, oh, that's creepy. That's really creepy. I also do think, though, that while it is scary, this book definitely leaned more in a like murder thriller kind of direction than into a spooky horror book, if that makes sense. There's definitely some supernatural elements in this book, and there's definitely those pieces that take place. And there is one thing I'm going to have to just vaguely talk about because I thought it was kind of cheating, but I'll get to that in just a second. But overall, this book was pretty scary. It has a little bit of a slow buildup, not a lot of the dread buildup that I feel like some other authors do really well, but I feel like Diane Hoh has really captured that college experience, but also set it on this backdrop of the spooky mansion kind of storyline where there's the spooky house on the hill where maybe creepy stuff has happened there. The house maybe is alive. Some stuff has gone down. Maybe it's haunted. Maybe who knows what exactly is going on. But she set that up so well. The house is definitely a character in this story, and the setting is so perfect. I felt like that was some of the best parts of this. You also have some really interesting characters. I thought Jess as a main character was very fascinating to follow along. You also do kind of follow some other characters here and there who are all part of this, but you are definitely wondering up until the very end, who's behind what's been going on? And there's a lot of mystery there and definitely some good red herrings. Mystery-wise, this was excellent. I definitely did not guess what was going on and the who behind the what. I did not guess it, and I thought that was great. I will say, though, as I mentioned earlier, there was one thing that I thought, oh no, that feels like a cheat. Like, it feels like you just sort of cheated by doing that. And there's one thing that she does near the very end of the story that I thought saved the day in kind of a too easy sort of way. Like, we had this build up. There's these tense scenes going on. And then all of a sudden, the very end, there's this one little thing that happens and you think, what? Why? You haven't totally set that up. I feel like that's a little random. I feel like that's too easy. And so it kind of really quickly resolved. And I thought that that was a little bit of a letdown. But the rest of it was so good, especially there is a sequence where one of the characters is trapped in the basement of the house. And that was terrifying. And I feel like it was so well done how Diane Hoh set it up, got it all set up to where the characters were and how they were moving and who was where. So you're just wondering who's behind this? It was so excellent from that sort of view. I really liked it. I think content-wise, it's really similar to a Fear Street book. So if you've read a Fear Street book, these are kind of similar, but they definitely have a different flavor. And I remember telling my wife, as I was reading this, I kind of stopped and I said, this is very interesting because I feel like I'm reading definitely from the author's point of view here is so different from R.L. Stine or Christopher Pike's point of view, who both of those authors write similar books to this, where there's some kind of supernatural element, there's a murder, there's mystery, there's things going on, and so you're trying to piece it all together. But in R.L. Stine and Christopher Pike, they often are more focused on external things about characters versus in this book, the internal things about characters are kind of brought to the forefront. And I think that Diane Hoh has a way of capturing the characters' internal thoughts and ways of processing the world around them in really true to life ways. I just kept thinking that is a different way of talking about that than R.L. Stine would have talked about that. One of the things that my brother and I laugh about R.L. Stine is you always have characters getting hot and cold all the time. All of a sudden there's this chill and they're wrapping up in a sweater. There's always sweaters, they're always cold, or they're always boiling hot and they're taking off the sweater. It's always that, every single time. And in this book, you don't have as much of that kind of silliness every now and again. It's just more of feels like a real world than sometimes Shady Side does, if that makes sense. I think that Diane has really set up a very realistic feeling college experience and set it up with that murder mystery, supernatural thriller kind of style storyline that makes it a great read. I really enjoyed this. I couldn't wait to get back to it. Every time I couldn't read it fast because I was doing a lot of things. It was kind of a busy time. And so I couldn't wait to get back to it. Every time I set the book down, I wanted to pick it back up again and keep reading. The chapters are pretty short. The font size is actually also fairly large for this size of a book, which I thought was interesting. And so it was a great read. So at the end of the day, I would definitely give book number 1 in the Nightmare Hall series, The Silent Scream, a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This was so much fun to read. I definitely enjoyed it. If you are into 90s like horror fiction, especially if you want to change a pace from like R.L. Stine, Christopher Pike, who often focus on high schoolers and read about the college experience, this is a great alternative, like kind of palate cleanser that's in the same kind of vein, but also super fun and scary at the same time. I definitely enjoyed this one. I want to read more. I am reading more. I'm reading book 2 right now, and it's just as good, if not better. I think book 2 already has some really terrifying stuff going on that is just so much fun. So definitely check this one out. If you're a fan of R.L. Stine, Christopher Pike, you like point horror, read this series. If you haven't read it, what are you doing? This is great fun. I will say, book 2 so far has been about different characters, but a lot of events from book 1 are referenced. So it's one of those books where it's not a direct sequel, but it's actually happening parallel to book 1 of Nightmare Hall, book 2 is. So you have some reference to different characters and things going on. So I think it's probably best to start at book 1 and to go through. I'll let you know for sure once I get to book 3, 4, etc. Like, can you read these out of order at all? But so far, it does seem to build upon the same storylines as before, but with a different set of characters. So definitely check this one out. I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's a lot of fun. And until next time, everybody, keep reading. Bye.